Welcome back into the Real Family Business Podcast, where we're here to talk all things about family business, both small and medium size, how you're going to scale, how you're going to grow, and telling you a little bit about Rollo Insurance story and how we took it from one guy, one producer who was the janitor, the account manager, and the accountant, kind of everything, all the way to currently at 200 team members, 60 offices across the country, and growing. Joined today by our Director of Digital Innovations, my little brother, Josiah Rollo, our Chief Technology Officer, Daniel Horn, and Jason Rollo, who is our CEO and founder. Today on this episode, what we wanted to discuss is technology. So who invited Jason to the discussion?
I don't know.
But, you know, what we have is on the podcast, like I said, we got Daniel, who's our Chief Technology Officer, going to lead us today. Josiah is in digital innovation, so does a lot of our stuff with technology on the podcast side. And then me as a president, I kind of get in Daniel's way quite a bit when it comes to technology because I like it. So we're going to have some fun.
Constructive ideas.
But, you know, today what we wanted to talk about is the topic of kind of how important is technology to a family business at this point. I think over the last, 30 years, it went from probably, yeah, sure, it's important in a dismissive way. And now it's like, no, this is an ability you have to be better or worse than big businesses because of how quick you can pivot.
Yeah, I think it's obvious that technology can be a big differentiating factor in the success of a small to mid-sized business. You know, I've been here for a while now. We've changed a ton. Our industry has changed a ton. Just the volume of tools that are both affordable and accessible to an average sized business is crazy now. You know, there's all kinds of things out there. It's almost your own fault if you're not using technology correctly. One thing I wanted to know, Jason, you started this company nearly 25 years ago now. I'd be interested to know, because you always tell the napkin story. You always tell the story about how you kind of sketched out the idea for this company on a napkin. I think sometimes you tell that because it's like the Southwest Airlines story.
It's actually true.
Yeah, but I was interested. Was there any technology on that napkin? Was anything like tech related on that initial business plan you did, or
it's just a black pen on a napkin? But you think about
where was technology when you started?
Well, okay, when I started the insurance business, you had binders with paper in them. I know what binders and paper.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
And so you would do your X-dating. You would have the calendar, and you would write in the dates, and you'd have to look up the month. 3 months from then when you're in that month, and you would know who to call based on it's all handwritten. There were computers, of course. In fact, the first computers that I remember we really started using, I was probably in junior high, and we would play all I remember is Oregon Trail, and you could use the space bar, and it would shoot the little minus button, which is like a bullet at the little elk and stuff. So cool.
Organ Trail is important. It teaches you a lot about failure.
No kidding.
Sure, you died a lot.
A lot of things not to do.
So I'm 50, and so you think back, however many years ago that was. I can remember when I was in junior high. Is when my dad got the first cell phone. It was a bag phone.
Yeah. And
you could only use it on major special occasions. But I think back to some of those things, and of course, I guess I progressed a little bit. Although I've still, Daniel, you said you've been here 11 years.
Mm-hmm.
And you remember that I thought IT, tech, information, whatever. It's just computer people.
Oh,
and so I would. Daniel's the one he didn't kill.
Well, where was it when you started? Like so was there anything you did on a computer in insurance?
Yes, there were DOS-based type programs,
text-based stuff.
Yeah, and it was very, very elementary. Okay,
like the green text on a black screen.
Yeah. And so of course, email a little bit when I was in college kind of came out, and that became a big deal, but not like it is now.
Right.
And so I look back at those type of things, and just the innovation of technology is incredible. The fact, think about this. I read something the other day. Your cell phone has more power than the computer systems that put someone on the moon.
Yep, that's exactly right.
That's unbelievable.
They have a bigger hard drive.
Even then, you think about technology. Okay, so this is an iPhone, and I dropped it, and so my camera, I can't. It doesn't zoom in right. But because I'm an old guy, I'm like, I'm not going to go by the stupid store. I just keep taking bad pictures. And then one day I'll finally go get it.
I think you're assuming that your pictures with a good camera would also be good.
Well, that's probably true. But it's funny though, because like when as you get older, you like technology and embrace it, but it's just such a fast moving thing. It's unbelievable. Well, think about like my grandmother and let's say her mother. I mean, you're getting back to covered wagon days.
Yeah.
Very quickly.
Well, that's what is really interesting to me. You were just talking about like basically nothing in insurance almost was technology related, and now, like
what isn't, you know?
I mean, and it's almost to the degree we were talking about this the other day. Like in
a
our
rather,
business,
a rather large agency from a phone, basically, we can.
Well, but we talked about this the other day. It's like when we hire a salesperson now, it's like if you can't type, you're gonna go broke because like used to in the old days, you could do things. You could pick up the phone, you could I don't know, write something out and get a quote.
Yeah.
Nowadays, it's like you literally can't even have something to sell if you don't know how to type.
I'll give you an example. Okay, so when we started, you could take a piece of paper and you could rate, let's say, a barn, for instance, on so many cents per hundred of value. And you could just
manual,
do it,
basically.
or just look at the chart, or I mean, you could do it quick. You could estimate what a house would cost on premium. And now there are so many factors involving all the different scoring and credit and if they pay their bills and rates and bands. There's no way.
But that's the key. You talked about how your phone is more powerful than what was on the spaceship that got us to the moon. The reason for that is the complexity of what's going on, the amount of variables. Because there's so many, and each one of them increases by an order of magnitude how difficult that is.
Well, I remember sitting with a company and there one time, and I remember them going into, let's say, certain credit scoring. It's not credit scoring, but it's insurance scoring, dealing with you pay your bills on time and this, that, and the other. And I hated that stuff. I was like, oh, this is terrible. That's a bunch of junk.
Probably say communist.
No, I guarantee I probably did. And I still think that.
But it's about 3 times a day.
Yeah, exactly. I'm a good American. Anyway, and so, but what's interesting is the data. I began to listen and look, and I'm like, well, the data is not lying.
Right.
These people that are having claims, are the ones that don't pay their bills.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and the reason these things are taking off, if we want to put it that way, is because they do work. You know, none of these things are just for show. None of these changes that are happening, you know, in any industry really that are digital based are just because people like the idea. It's because they work. It's because they actually bring returns.
And I'll say this much, Daniel. I have learned, you'll be happy that I'm confessing this, that IT is more than just changing batteries in a remote control.
This is correct.
Because the television is out in the office.
Look, so as we segue.
I've learned a lot.
Yeah.
Right. First part of this was about, look, in our business, technology has changed the world. I'm sure it's the same for you. You run a family business that's a manufacturing company or a real estate company or a bank. I can guarantee you technology has changed the way that you do business. We're going to talk about that just a little bit. But before we do that, I got a little story for Jason. So we did a remodel in our office upstairs, 3 years ago. We took one big office and we made 4 offices out of it, basically. And when we did that, it basically, all of the computers being plugged in flipped a breaker switch, I guess, because there was just more power that was being drained out. And I knew what the problem was, and I heard him talking about it. And I walk up here, and Daniel's mumbling under his breath, walking out as he normally does. And I'm like, Daniel, what? Why are you even here? Like, the breaker just flipped. Why are you here? He said, well, if it plugs in the wall, it's my problem. So I'm glad to hear that you've learned. That's not how technology works.
It's still kind of that way. You know, it's not. We've not completely moved past that.
So Daniel, I know you wanted to take us beyond just the crazy change, but where are we going next?
Well, I mean, everybody's talking about AI.
Yeah.
You know, the problem is we don't even really know what it means yet. We don't really know where it's going. You know, you talked about the change in what a person has to be able to do to be successful. You know, maybe as a producer or even as an account manager in our company, just your basic literacy. Yep. But the interesting thing to me is, everybody's like, well, is AI going to replace people? No, I don't think that's the case. Yep. But I heard someone put it really well recently. They said people who are good at using AI will replace people who are bad at using AI.
That was me. I was that guy.
Yeah. Was it Jackson? Yeah. I don't know where you got it from.
I stole it from someone too. Though.
Yeah, I was about to say you were not the primary source on that. But it's the same. I mean, people who were good at using computers replace people who were not good at using computers.
Sounds like
I think that's what we're going to see.
Coming from a job.
Yeah. So, no, I think, Josiah, I'd be interested to hear your take, right? You're the youngest guy on the panel today. Technology always big when you're growing up, and you kind of grew up with iPhones almost around you since you probably remember. How important is it to you from the young perspective? And then we'll go to you from it growing to you. What does it look like?
So one thing that's changed a lot from a consumer perspective is who can get popular, right? So before it's like you have to be a movie star for people to know your name. Now it's like you can just have a camera or even your phone in your room and you can be so popular you have millions of people watching whatever you do. Yeah. I think that's the beauty of technology. There's a lot of things wrong with technology.
You can also go to jail the same way.
Yes. But what I'm saying is the beauty of technology is small businesses can be equalized in a world where not necessarily the money makes the difference.
It's a great point.
It can be how you use the technology in free ways.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, that's a great point.
What about you? How have you seen the shift in where like a family business could utilize some of these things to like their advantage actually?
Well, I would say there's a phrase that I've used a while back is technology with a soul.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is you should use the technology to make you better while not missing who you are in the process. So I think we do a really good job of that. We have some really amazing technology that we use. Of course, coming from a small town, I call it high tech redneck.
Yep.
But I mean, hey, I'm from a small town in East Texas.
That's his country singer name.
Yeah. but the point is, if used correctly, you can do the things technology is meant to do.
Yeah.
And to me, AI and whatever all that is, it's still people using this to make things better. And I guess you can have some system somewhere where it does things and goes crazy, but it'll never replace human beings if done correctly, because it's computers. At the end of the day, this stuff is not alive. Now, what's scary, you live in a society where people are talking about the future, their friends will be the computers because it'll talk to them and interact with them almost like this intuitive learning stuff.
That's already part of it.
That exists already.
Yeah, but people that are grounded are going to realize it's a computer.
Yeah.
Well,
If
we're
you're
also
not
seeing-
grounded, then if your best friend is a computer, dude, get a life.
You've got a problem.
That's right.
Yeah,
But
for sure.
We're seeing that people aren't really happy in the long term with that kind of thing.
Well, COVID,
not.
COVID proved that, right? Whenever
Yes.
people, we're social creatures. Like we need interaction with other people. And that's why I think like you call it technology with a soul. One of the things that I know, like we say to our people consistently is, hey, look, technologies we bring in they're not meant to replace you.
Right.
The technologies we're bringing in are actually they're not meant to replace the client interactions that you have.
No. But like
they're actually meant to enhance your client interactions. So maybe you have more time on the phone because something is doing something automated on the backside that you would have had to do before. Now you can spend 5 minutes on the phone talking to someone about, their grandkids or their kids' sports, or they just got married and life advice, whatever it might be.
Yeah, I always tell my team that people should do people jobs and machines should do machine jobs. If you do that, everybody's happy.
Perfect example, a shovel versus a backhoe.
Yeah.
I mean, that's technology.
Yeah, it is.
Okay. I mean,
It's
you
not
study
digital,
the
but it's
history.
technology.
You study the history of wars, and you have, whoever had the bigger guns, the faster planes, they would win the wars. That's technology.
So let's use that example.
Go to football.
So let's use that example.
Forward pass. That's technology, if you will. In this conversation, I mean, making an analogy.
Yeah. In my opinion is when we're thinking about it, and the reason we want to talk about this today on this podcast, right, is we're talking to family businesses.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think that technology and the wave that we're having of technology can absolutely give you an advantage over larger corporations. And the reason I know that is because you can make decisions quicker. Like we're a private business. You know what we want to do? If we decide, hey, there's a technology we want to do, we have budget to do it, we go buy that thing and we implement it right now. There's no, hey, how's this going to work? How are we going to roll it out? I mean, we want to be nimble and agile. And yeah, there's planning that goes along with that, but it has really opened up our ability to do things. I know, we have done some pretty creative things with AI, with modeling, with even just like a CRM that's going to help us engage with people faster, and it gives us an advantage because we already have the advantage of being local. We already have the advantage of relationships, and now on top of that, we have better technology. Tell me why someone would want to work with someone bigger than us. Because the reality is we have everything better than they already have it.
We're seeing a really interesting thing right now where a lot of these bigger, I guess you would say, legacy companies that you might traditionally think were more established or had better credibility, they're really hard to change on the inside.
It's like moving a battleship.
Yeah, it's like moving a battleship, exactly. So if they want to implement something new, it's going to cost them a lot more to do it. They're going to train a lot more new people. It's going to affect too many different things down the road, and they really don't want to do it.
It's also very difficult for them to be genuine.
It is. It absolutely is. Yeah. There's
Well,
too many
because
layers
if
of removal.
bottom line profit matters, then guess what? If a technology can replace a person and is going to make me more money, why not do it?
There's also too many degrees of separation between the top and the bottom.
It's kind of like the last conversation we had, right? About like you have to be a learning leader, but you have to stick to your values. There's a balance to everything in life, and the balance to the technology is: are you a committed person to valuing your client relationships enough to where you're not, going to give them up for a computer
And valuing your employees.
Yeah.
What I would be really interested to hear kind of your take and thoughts on all of this stuff, because it's changing fast, but we kind of grew up in the world where technology is
Changing
it's
fast.
normal and we're used to it changing fast. How do you view it?
I view it as at first it can be scary if you don't embrace it correctly, but I also view it as wonderful if used correctly. And here's what I mean by that. If you have a business, we're talking about family businesses, and usually they're this way, not all sadly, but most, many. If at the core they know who they are and their values are set and their integrity is in place and that kind of thing, they're only going to use these innovations to make it better for what they're trying to do. Mm-hmm. And so I've seen it when implemented that way. It's awesome. I mean, it's really fantastic. Okay. And so again, you got to make sure you're not set in your ways. And so you embrace new opportunities. So when you look at it, to me, it's a matter of looking, okay, how is this going to make us better? Is it just spending money to spend money? Because there is that. And sometimes you got to be careful. You'll waste a lot of money. Yep. I know we had one the other day that they were supposed to do this, 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 and this. And I asked one question, hey, will it do that? Well, no, not yet. Well, then it'd be a waste of money to buy it at this time because it won't do what we really need it to do. Yep. Yeah. On the other hand, I think about the various things that now kind of are old hat, but the mobile apps and the different things that we even have in place now that have made our life so much better, so much quicker, so much more efficient. And therefore, what are you doing? You're really taking care of the client in a better way. And we haven't lost who we are, the relationship aspect, which is the glue that holds it all together. So I would say, if done correctly, it's amazing. If not done correctly, then it can become something that destroys you because you rely on that technology and lose what made you are who you are, which is being real.
I think a key to that is planning and preparation.
Yes.
You know, we see so many small business owners who maybe they feel like they're a little bit behind in their technology stack and they kind of panic. They don't really know what to do. They think, oh, I'm so far behind, I'll never be able to change this. You know, I got to bring in some big consultant, or I've got to, buy this really expensive tool or something. And it doesn't really work because they haven't planned it out. They just made a quick kind of knee-jerk decision there. You've got to kind of accept that, like, this is going to take me a little while to do, but it's going to pay off in the long run.
Yeah. I think that we had a little bit of shiny object syndrome whenever I first got here. And honestly, we had like a negative reaction to technology. I know a couple times I brought up, hey, what about this? Like, 5 years ago, we bought this tool. We never implemented it and we hated it. I think since then, we still have I think you should have like the syndrome of shiny objects to some degree, in my opinion, because usually what's flashing is something, it's a problem you're trying to fix.
It's at least worth looking at.
We look at everything now. Where we've gotten better, in my opinion, is we've gotten better at saying, okay, we really want this thing to do X, Y, and Z, and it only really does X. And we're just not really willing to do it right now. Like you were talking about that before. It's like, hey, it will communicate with your clients and it'll run your pipeline, but it won't allow you to text out of it. And texting out of it's really the only thing we wanted. So we don't really have to have the other.
You got to be willing to say no sometimes.
Yes, and I'll also say this too, timing, because I remember when I first started, I was like you, but this was many years ago, and I went and researched, and I guarantee I found the best management system you could have, figured out a way to pay for it, but then we owned it, and there was just a few of us. We didn't even have time to learn it, much less use it, because we weren't ready.
Yep.
And so you can also see something, but it doesn't fit who you are and where you are in your progression of growth as a business.
Don't outpace your tools.
Yes.
No.
So let's talk about three things that it relates to this, because I think no matter what industry you're in, you're going to have the same kind of three problems. Number one, how do you build a timeline and like a process to not have that problem? The second thing is, how do you manage relationships with like vendors? Because that's a problem too. A lot of these technologies you're buying a third party, and I would say if you can't have a relationship with them, don't work with them, because you're going to be left on your own. It's never going to work. And then the last thing I think is just talking about how do you avoid that shiny object syndrome. So kind of start with that first one. How do you implement, like what would your recommendation be as a CTO, like of how to pipeline this thing out? Just so I jump in second.
I think your first thing has to be your goals. Your goals have to be clear. They have to be specific. Yep. You can't just be saying, oh, I'm going to, buy all these things and then magically the business will be better in 2 or 3 years. No, have specific goals, put them in an order that you think are the most important. Maybe that's the ones you can implement the quickest, that have the biggest immediate impact. That might be one way you could do it. Maybe you could say this one will take longer, but it'll have a bigger impact over the long run. You can do that. Plot it out on, a calendar. Say we're going to take 6 months to do this one, 3 months to do that one. Move them around a bit if you can. Figure out your budgeting. I mean, that's obviously always a big concern. And then sit down with your people and say, hey, how do you feel about this idea? Get a couple of trusted people in your company to say, hey, let's bounce these ideas around. Do we think we can actually do this? How does this work in your workflow? Yep. Don't make unilateral decisions.
I think that's such a good point, Daniel, because think about this. If you don't know where you're going, how do you know? Using, again, I love analogies. How do you know whether you need to buy a car or get a plane ticket or a boat. If you don't know where you're going, it kind of depends.
Yeah.
So again, if you don't know your goals, this technology may cost a lot of money, but doesn't get you to where you're going.
Don't look for a solution in search of a problem. Don't do that.
Yeah.
You also got to make sure you can pay for the technology.
Yes.
Don't just buy a big.
Oh yeah.
Like for woodworking, this is really real for me because there's a bunch of really shiny tools that I would really like, right? But sometimes the project doesn't necessarily.
Yeah.
Like when I made these tables, there was a tool that I needed to make these
He
tables.
wanted to throw that in there.
I
made these tables.
I made these tables. Yes.
He did.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
I could have bought a really fancy tool that I could do this specific project with, but in reality, I needed a smaller tool that did the job I needed it to do in a less efficient way, but it was affordable.
Yep.
And also there was a job that was needed. You didn't go buy it a year ago.
Yeah, that's right.
I also would say this too. I'm gonna piggyback off of you because there's probably 3 things I've learned about technology in the last year. I know me and you have worked together a lot in the last year because we have completely changed our technology within the last year here. But the first thing is the tool, if you can get it done with a cheaper, smaller tool, do it.
Yes.
Like, I think that is a problem that I had originally. It was like, oh man, here's the big bad one. But the reality is, if you use it, it will work. So if you can use the small one, then use the small one until you get to the point where you have the consistency and the deliberation to get it done, then upgrade. Because the hardest part of any new technology is building the habits behind using them. Right. No technology is good by itself.
We did that because basically when I bought that new, shiny, wonderful management system that we couldn't run, and then I went back to one that was smaller, and we ran that thing until it was like a car smoking with a chassis. And then we switched back to the one we had years ago because we were ready.
Yes, right.
So that was part of learning, I guess.
So I would say this is something like we did this a while back. There's a new thing we're doing here right now, and we could buy software for it. And I literally told both of these guys, I said, nope, we're using a spreadsheet. You know why? Because until we prove the commitment to the discipline of this action, we're not going to go spend money on it. Even if it's like $50, I don't care. I just, the principle, you use the small thing until you build the habit, then support the habit with the resources you need. The second thing is the other thing that I think within these, you have to have someone own the project. You were saying basically, how do you pipeline this thing out? You have to prioritize. This technology is most important because it fixes our number one problem. But on top of that, you have to have someone that owns the project.
Well, and that's it. You talk about own it. That's one of the things I love about what we do. All of the locations we have, because we have good people, they're local, but their ability to tap into what we're doing helps them as well. But because we have someone that owns that project or owns that area, I mean, you look at Daniel,
everybody
he has a whole department.
Everybody in our company owns something, right? Like an account manager, they own the client relationship and focusing on making it work. The producer, they own the project of bringing in new people into the company. Daniel's department owns all of the softwares working together. We got one person in our company, they literally own our management systems, like our filing cabinet. They make sure it's correct and updated. You know, you own the company, I guess. That everybody has to have something. Everybody has to have something that they own. You know, the next thing I want to talk about. Over. So the next, steward's over, right? That's what I'm saying.
My goal is just to keep your mom happy. That's a full-time job.
So but I think you have to have somebody, because when there's ownership of the project, right? People they will work harder for that if they feel like I get to influence this in a good way or bad way. I don't want to let you down. The other thing I was going to say is vendors, because any technologies you buy, you're going to have some type of vendor relationship. Let's start with you, because it starts with buying it. What's your tips for negotiation? Because every vendor we ever have, they're always like, your dad's a good negotiator. Yeah.
Well, I mean, to me, the first thing is get to know the people that are involved in that particular company and find out, are they, number one, do they have any ability to make decisions? If not, try to find the people who can make the decisions. But also, are they long-term there? Can you trust them? Are they just simply trying to sell you something? Because, again, if you buy something, you're going to have to service it or grow it or add on to it. And you don't want to just jump out and have buyer's remorse.
Totally.
So to me, I approach it the same way I do with everything, including our carriers. Everything is about relationship.
Yep.
The rest of it makes it work. But without that relationship, you're really dealing with just a commodity type approach, and I don't like that at all.
I will go ahead. You jump in, because
I was going to say that I deal with vendors a lot, and I think that the more critical that a piece of software or any kind of tool is to your operations, it should be proportionally important to have that rep or that vendor person physically accessible to you. The more important that is to you, know where that vendor is. Like, if you need to go to their office and talk to them, be able to do it.
If
If you have eat a meal with them. Like call them up when you're driving through town and say, hey, let's go get coffee or something. That is so huge, because if you've got this system that your entire company runs on and it's on the other side of the world and something goes wrong, you're going to be a little bit out of luck sometimes. But if it's 20 miles down the road, great. You can deal with it a lot easier.
One of our companies has a beautiful ad I saw one time that said, it doesn't matter who you're insured with until it does.
Until it
so
does.
Think about your vendor. Well, it doesn't matter until it does.
Yeah.
So you better make sure you have those connections and that company is going to stand behind what they have offered, if they can fix it, if they can help your problems, because that's the key to making all this work.
I would just kind of bring all that together. Just how you got any thoughts before I bring it all together?
Well, what I'm hearing echoed over and over is in all things technology and in all things vendors, the most important thing is to keep your relationships.
Yes.
Yep. That's kind of how I was going to bring it back together. Is look, you know how technology companies are run? They're run by people.
Yep.
So it's all about people. So you have to have relationships with your people. I think that's been the biggest thing that we have done over the last couple of years. We've had to bring on quite a few new vendors, and I can't tell you how many of them that we know the CEOs personally, and we can talk to them personally at this point. And a lot of that was because in the early stage, right, when they were trying to work with us, it was like, look, hey, your technology is great. Show me the people behind it, because the reality is the technology is going to either get better or worse based on the people who are behind those things. And you want to have those relationships because, like they said, a problem comes up, or even on a positive direction, right? You want to be able to influence them for good, because everybody is looking to make their value proposition better. And technology companies' value propositions is usually behind the software that they have. So
there was a book I read years ago called Dig Your Well Before You're Thirsty. And that's the idea of networking, but networking applies to every aspect of business, including vendor negotiations and vendor relationships that connect to those negotiations. Because if you are the right kind of person, what are you always going to strive for? Honestly, a win-win.
Yep.
And if they're not the kind of people that are wanting to do that, you better watch it and don't buy it, because you're going to end up with a problem.
So at the end of the day, technology is going to be a very important part of any business, big, small, family-owned, non-family-owned. But the reality is, for a family-owned business, technology can be the thing that separates you. I know we're going to talk about scale, and technology is a big piece to that. Technology, it runs everything at this point. I mean, we all kind of have one of these, and it drives a lot of it. Don't forget who you are. Do not replace your people with it. Do not replace your people interactions with the clients with it if you want to be successful, but use it in areas that you can. Find ways to make your team better, and one of those ways you might make a team better is through technology.
In short, it's a tool. It's part of what you do. It's not who you are.
Absolutely.
That's what you're saying.
Absolutely. So, thank you guys for joining the Real Family Business Podcast. We hope you've enjoyed the episode. Make sure to subscribe.
How do I get a new cell phone? The store?
Yeah, you can go to the store. But, when you get that new cell phone, make sure that you like and subscribe our podcast and follow us on socials. Appreciate you guys. See you next episode.